You're listening to Trace Hunt Radio. We explore the darkest chapters of true crime, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and the twisted minds behind them. Follow the blood, chase the clues, uncover the truth. Stay sharp. The hunt begins now.
On the outskirts of a small industrial town where rusted rail lines twist into the weeds and nature reclaims what industry left behind, there stands a train station that shouldn't exist. The timetable stopped decades ago. The last departure was in 1983. Since then, the ticket windows have been boarded up, the waiting benches covered in dust, and the tracks swallowed by silence. Locals call it the Phantom Station. For years, it was nothing more than a ruin and urban legend whispered among teenagers who dared each other to step inside at night. But that all changed one fog-soaked morning, when a rail worker doing routine track checks found something impossible. A freshly printed train ticket lying on the platform. Its date? 2 days from now. Beside it lay the body of a man unknown, unclaimed, and dressed in clothes decades out of fashion. No signs of a struggle, no cause of death. But as investigators began digging, they uncovered an even stranger detail. The station's long-defunct security camera had recorded a train, pulling in hours before the discovery. A train no one else saw. And somewhere between that spectral arrival and the man's final breath, a killer stepped out of the shadows onto a platform that time itself seemed to have forgotten. This is the story of a murder at the Phantom train station, and the mystery of a suspect who may never have boarded or ever left. Chapter 1, The Platform That Time Forgot. The fog clung to the streets like a damp shroud that morning, kneading the world into shades of gray. Harold Jansen, a veteran track inspector for the Central Northern Rail, was used to the early shift. He liked the quiet, the hum of his own breath in the cold, the crunch of gravel under his boots, the occasional flutter of a crow's wings as it took off from the rusted fence line. But even he avoided this part of the line when he could. The old East Halverton station had been shut down since before he'd joined the railway. Too many budget cuts, too few passengers. Over the years, the weeds had taken over the platform, creeping up through the cracks in the tiles, swallowing the faded departures board. Vandals had broken the windows long ago, leaving jagged teeth of glass in the frames. Jansen was there that morning because a signal relay had gone dead, somewhere between the freight depot and the east switchyard. He followed the line, toolkit slung over one shoulder, his breath puffing into the chill. By the time he reached the platform, the fog had thickened into something almost tangible, curling around his knees like a restless animal. That's when he saw it. A shape slumped on one of the old benches. At first, he thought it was just another vagrant sleeping off a bottle. But as he drew closer, the stillness was wrong. No rise and fall of breath. The head tilted at an unnatural angle. Jansen's stomach tightened. He set his toolkit down and stepped forward, boots echoing faintly on the cracked concrete. The man's skin was pale, his hair slicked neatly back in a style Jansen hadn't seen since old photos of his grandfather. A wool coat buttoned to the throat, polished shoes, a faded leather satchel resting by his side. And in his right hand, gripped loosely between cold fingers, was a paper ticket, crisp, clean, ink still sharp. Jansen glanced at the printed date, 2 days from now. A ripple of unease crawled up his spine. That was impossible. No trains had come through here in 40 years. He fumbled for his phone, but the signal was dead. No surprise this far out. He turned toward the tracks, intending to retrace his steps back toward the working line, when something caught his eye. The station's ancient CCTV camera, bolted high under the eaves, was pointed straight at the platform. The thing had been disconnected for decades, its cable cut and dangling, and yet a faint red light glowed from the lens. By the time Detective Clara Hensley arrived with her partner, Sergeant Boone, the scene had been cordoned off. The forensics team was already photographing the body, carefully lifting the ticket from the man's hand, bagging it like a holy relic. "Any ID?" Hensley asked. Boone shook his head. "Nothing in the satchel but a notebook. All the pages are blank. And the cause of death? Too early to tell. No wounds, no sign of a struggle. It's like he just sat down and stopped." Hensley crouched to study the man's face. His features were sharp, almost delicate, but there was something unsettling about them. The stillness too perfect, like a wax figure. She glanced toward the CCTV camera. "That thing shouldn't be working." Boone followed her gaze. "We checked the feed. You'll want to see it." In the station office, a dusty, cobwebbed room that smelled faintly of mildew, an ancient monitor flickered to life. The video showed the platform hours before Jansen arrived. At 3:17 a.m., the fog parted just enough to reveal a train. Not a freight hauler, not a modern passenger service. Something older, steel-bodied, riveted seams, lantern-style headlights glowing through the mist. It rolled in slow, hissing steam, brakes squealing softly. A figure stepped down from the first carriage. The man in the wool coat. He paused, glanced over his shoulder. And for the briefest moment, another shape appeared in the frame. Blurred, faceless, standing in the doorway of the train. Then the door shut. The train pulled away, vanishing into the fog as though it had never been there. And at 3:21 a.m., the man sat down on the bench. He never moved again. Hensley leaned back from the monitor. Her pulse ticked in her ears. "Boone," she said quietly. "You know what this means?" He nodded grimly. "Yeah, we just recorded a train that doesn't exist." Chapter 2, Echoes in the Fog. Detective Clara Hensley had seen her share of strange cases, arsons with no accelerant, disappearances without exits, at nothing in her 15. Years had prepared her for the sight of a dead man stepping off a ghost train. The forensic report came in before dawn the next day. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, the medical examiner, called her directly instead of sending the usual email. That was never a good sign. "You'll want to hear this in person," Marlowe said. In the morgue's chilled air, the body lay on a steel table under harsh fluorescent lights. Marlowe pulled the sheet back just enough to reveal the man's face. No external injuries. "No signs of struggle," she began. "No defensive wounds, no bruising. Toxicology came back clean. No drugs, no alcohol, no poisons we can identify." "So, what killed him?" Hensley asked. "That's the thing." Marlowe glanced at the report. "It's like his body just shut down, heart stopped. Organs perfectly healthy, no sign of disease. Time of death lines up exactly with when he sat on that bench. It's as if he decided to stop living." Boone frowned. "That's not a thing." "No," Marlowe agreed, "but it's what the evidence says." Hensley moved closer. There was something about the man's skin, not just pale, but almost dry, like parchment. "That," Marlowe said, following her gaze, "is the other strange part, the skin slightly desiccated. Like he's been dead for days, but his core temperature says otherwise. And here's the kicker. I found microscopic traces of coal dust in his lungs. Not the modern stuff you get from industrial sites. This is 19th century bituminous coal residue." Hensley's mind ticked through the possibilities. None of them made sense. The next stop was East Halverton itself, the community that had grown up around the station before it was abandoned. The streets were quiet, save for the low hum of an early morning cafe. Locals stared at the detectives as they entered, wordless and suspicious. A wiry man with a white beard leaned over the counter. "You hear about the Phantom, aren't you?" Hensley raised an eyebrow. "The Phantom? That station's cursed," he said. "My father told me about it, and his father told him. Some nights, usually when the fog's thick, you hear the whistle. Low and long, like it's calling for someone. If you go down there..." He trailed off. "You've seen it?" Boone asked. "Once I was a kid, maybe 12, my mate dared me to go. I saw lights through the fog. Thought it was just some maintenance train. Then it rolled past, slow as a funeral march. Windows all dark except one, and in that one a face staring back at me. Pale, watching. Hensley glanced at Boone. The description was too close to the CCTV footage to ignore. Back at the station office, the tech team had enhanced the video from the night before. The blur in the train's doorway was now clearer, not a smudge, but a man. His features were indistinct, almost as if the camera lens refused to hold them in focus. But his posture was unmistakable, standing half-turned, watching the man in the wool coat step off. "Freeze it," Hensley said. The image locked. Boone squinted. "You think that's our killer?" Hensley didn't answer. She was staring at something else, the faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass of the train door, fingers long and splayed, as if to hold it open. "Enhance that section," she said. When the image sharpened, the fingers looked wrong. Too thin, the joints oddly spaced. Not deformed, exactly, but almost inhuman. The tech shook his head. "I can run facial recognition, but I doubt we'll get a match. This guy's not in any database." Boone muttered. Hell, he might not even be alive. By evening, the case had already taken on a life of its own in the press. Headlines screamed about ghost train murder mystery and dead man with ticket to nowhere. Paranormal enthusiasts began to swarm the outskirts of the station, cameras and EMF detectors in hand. Hensley hated that kind of attention. It poisoned witness statements, turned fact into spectacle. But she couldn't deny the creeping feeling in her gut. Something about this case wasn't playing by the normal rules. That night, she returned to the station alone. The fog had rolled in thick again, curling over the tracks like smoke from an invisible fire. She stood on the platform listening. At first, there was nothing, just the faint drip of condensation from the roof. Then, so soft she almost doubted she heard it, came a sound from the distance. A whistle, long, low. "Morning." It echoed through the mist, closer now, followed by the metallic clatter of wheels on rails. Hensley's heart thudded. She stepped to the edge of the platform, straining to see through the fog. A light bloomed, yellow, flickering, growing larger. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. No train, no tracks disturbed. Just the silence swallowing her whole. Chapter 3. The Man from the Past. By morning, Detective Claire Hensley had 3 things: a dead man with no cause of death, a ticket for a train that didn't exist, and a CCTV recording that defied logic. What she didn't have was a name. That changed when the fingerprints came back. It wasn't a match in any modern criminal or civilian database. Instead, it triggered a historical record flag from the National Archives. The man had been identified once before in 1981 when he'd applied for a passport. His name was Arthur Lionel Greaves. And according to the record, he'd been declared legally dead in 1987. Cause of death? Missing? Presumed drowned. Hensley sat across from Boone in the squad room, the files spread out between them. Greaves was a historian, Boone read. Specialized in British industrial heritage, especially the railway boom of the 19th century. Worked at the National Rail Museum for over a decade. Married once, wife died of pneumonia in '85. No kids. And the disappearance? Witnesses said he was last seen boarding a ferry to Calais. The ferry hit rough waters overnight. Several passengers went overboard, Greaves included. Body was never recovered. Officially, he drowned. Case closed. Until he walks off a train 36 years later, Hensley said quietly. Boone shook his head. He'd be in his 70s now. This guy looks mid-40s maybe. That's assuming time works the same way for wherever he's been, Hensley replied. The words sounded ridiculous, even to her. But in this case, ridiculous seemed to be the default. Digging deeper, they found that Greaves had been researching a very specific piece of railway history in the months before his disappearance, the Halverton Special, a luxury overnight train service launched in 1901 and decommissioned after only 6 months. The official reason had been mechanical faults and low passenger demand. But in Greaves' notes, preserved in the museum archives, there were handwritten annotations suggesting a darker story. Multiple passengers vanishing mid-journey. staff members resigning without explanation, and one incident where the train arrived at its destination with fewer people on board than had departed. Most chillingly, Greaves had underlined a single line from a 1901 newspaper clipping. Locals warned against boarding the Halverton Special on nights of heavy fog. Hensley and Boone drove to Greaves' last known address in East Halverton. The house had been sold decades ago, but the current owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Caro, remembered him. "He was a quiet man," she said, pouring tea with trembling hands. Polite, always carried a leather satchel. But toward the end, he became obsessed. He'd walk to the station late at night, even though it had been closed for years. Said he was waiting for the right night. "What did he mean by that?" Hensley asked. Mrs. Caro shook her head. "I don't know. But the last time I saw him, it was foggy, thick as soup. He tipped his hat, said, 'If I'm not back, tell them I caught the special.' And then he was gone." Back at the station office, Hensley had the tech team pull the CCTV footage again. This time, she asked them to slow it to a crawl, frame by frame, as Greaves stepped off the Phantom train. That's when she noticed something. His coat was the same as in the 1981 passport photo. Same cut, same buttons, even the faint fray at the cuffs. But more than that, there was no sign of wear from decades of use. It was as though he'd bought it yesterday. And in his satchel, the forensics lab had found a railway map dated 1901. The ink was fresh, the paper crisp, untouched by age. Boone stared at the report. So either someone's running the world's most elaborate historical reenactment, or he really did step out of another time. That night, Hensley couldn't shake the thought. If Greaves had come back, why had he died instantly? She played the footage again in her apartment, pausing on the blurred figure in the train doorway. The longer she looked, the more she felt the shape wasn't just watching Greaves, it was waiting. And the hand on the glass, those two long fingers, they weren't holding the door open. They were reaching for him. Chapter 4. Passengers Who Never Returned. The local archives in East Halverton were kept in a cramped brick building behind the town hall, its front room smelling of paper, dust, and damp carpet. Hensley signed in at the desk, Boone trailing behind, and met the town archivist, a thin man named Mr. Ledbury, who looked as though he'd been born between the stacks and never left. She explained her request, sightings of the Phantom train going back as far as possible. Ledbury's expression didn't even flicker. "Follow me," he said, voice low. They wound through narrow aisles to a back table where a cardboard box sat waiting. Inside, neat bundles of yellowed newspapers were tied with twine. Ledbury began laying them out one by one. The first article was dated March 1924. Local school teacher vanishes after claiming she would meet a suitor arriving on the late-night special, last seen on the platform during heavy fog. Police report no scheduled trains that night. The next, November 1949. Railway porter describes seeing an unlisted train at 12:15 a.m., windows unlit except for a single compartment. Passenger disembarked and walked into the fog. Never identified. And again, July 1963. Young couple missing after midnight picnic near Old Halverton Station. Witness reports hearing a whistle and seeing carriage lights pass through the fog, despite tracks being out of service. Each incident was decades apart, but the details were eerily similar. Heavy fog, a single lit compartment, someone stepping off the train and never seen again. Then Hensley noticed something. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the photo of Arthur Greaves taken the night he died. In every archived case, the missing person had been someone deeply tied to the railway's porters, engineers, ticket clerks, even a map illustrator. And Greaves, of course, had been a railway historian. "This thing isn't random," Hensley murmured. "It's choosing them." Boone glanced over her shoulder. "Or someone's choosing them. That blurred figure we saw, maybe it's not a ghost. Maybe it's a collector." When they left the archives, fog was already rolling in, curling low along the streets. Hensley stopped at the corner, staring down toward the old station. Even from here, she thought she heard it. That faint, almost mournful whistle. She shook it off. We need to know what happens to these people after they step on. Boone smirked without humor. What's your plan? Flag it down and ask for a ride. Something like that, Hensley said, eyes narrowing. They returned to the squad room and requested the personal effects from Greaves's body again. Hensley spread them on the table. The satchel, the 1901 map, the unmarked brass ticket punched with a strange symbol, a circle split by a vertical line, etched too precisely to be handmade. She photographed the symbol and sent it to the National Rail Heritage Database. An hour later, the reply came in. No match found in British railway history. Closest similarity? A logo used by an unregistered private line operating briefly in northern England, circa 1901, line known locally as the Black Route. There was no surviving record of its schedule, destinations, or owners. The company had vanished after 6 months, along with its passenger logs. That night, Boone drove Hensley back toward the station. Cameras were mounted on their coats, set to record every angle. The fog was so thick it seemed to have weight, muffling their footsteps. They stood on the cracked platform, eyes straining against the white void. Then, at exactly 12:15 a.m., the whistle came, low, long, and impossibly close. Light bloomed in the fog. The rails began to hum. And from the darkness, a carriage door opened. Chapter 5. Boarding the Black Route. The carriage loomed out of the fog, impossibly intact, polished black paint, brass trim gleaming as though it had been waxed yesterday. Every surface shimmered with moisture from the night air, but there was no rust, no decay, no sign it had been sitting abandoned for more than a century. Boone swore under his breath. It's not a trick. This thing's real. Hensley stepped forward slowly, her flashlight beam skimming over ornate lettering on the side. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language she recognized. The door at the center of the carriage was already open, a faint amber glow spilling onto the platform. Inside, velvet seats lined the walls, the fabric deep red, unblemished. A brass luggage rack leaned above. And yet, no one sat inside. They exchanged a glance. Boone mouthed, "You first." Hensley placed a boot on the step. The moment her foot touched the brass, a cold shiver surged up her spine. Not the kind from a draft, but the bone-deep chill of being watched. She stepped inside. The smell was immediate. Coal smoke and old leather, faintly sweet, as if clinging to the air from another century. Her eyes flicked to the far end of the compartment, where a second door led deeper into the train. Boone climbed in behind her, pulling out his phone to start filming. "We get 10 minutes tops," he whispered. "Then we get out." The door behind them hissed shut. They froze. Outside, the fogged glass was empty. No platform, no station lights. Only shifting white. The hum beneath their feet deepened. The train was moving. Hensley bolted to the door, yanking at the handle. Locked. Boone tried the opposite side. Also locked. Then the inner door creaked open. A man stood there, dressed in a conductor's uniform of deep navy with gold trim. His face was pale, waxy, almost too smooth, and his eyes, clouded and blinking, didn't seem to focus on them so much as through them. "Tickets," he said. His voice was flat, like a phonograph recording. Hensley handed over the brass ticket from Greaves' satchel. The conductor's long fingers brushed hers, and she flinched at the icy temperature. He studied the ticket, then nodded once. "You are bound for the last stop," he said. Boone frowned. "What's the last stop?" The conductor's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "The one you don't come back from." Before they could react, the train shuddered, and the lights dimmed. Through the window, shadows moved in the fog, human shapes pacing alongside the carriage, keeping perfect speed. Some pressed their faces to the glass, eyes wide, mouths opening in silent screams. Hensley's heart slammed. She recognized one of them, Arthur Greaves, his expression frozen in terror. The conductor stepped aside, gesturing toward the inner door. "Please proceed to your compartment." Boone shot Hensley a look that said, "We need to get off this thing. Now?" But as they turned, the outside fog shifted, revealing nothing but endless black rails stretching into darkness. And the train wasn't slowing down. Chapter 6. The Passenger Ledger. The hum of the wheels became a rhythmic pulse, almost hypnotic. Hensley forced herself to stay alert, her eyes darting to every shadow in the compartment. Boone's hand hovered near the small tactical flashlight clipped to his belt, their only real weapon. They moved toward the assigned compartment the conductor had indicated, the red velvet curtains swaying faintly with each sway of the train. As Hensley slid the door open, she froze. On the table inside lay a leather-bound book. It was impossibly pristine, its cover embossed with the same strange symbol from the brass ticket, the split circle. She opened it. Every page was filled with names, meticulously handwritten in a looping, almost Victorian script. The entries were sorted by date, not current dates, but dates stretching back more than a century. Each entry had 2 columns, embarked and final stop. She ran her finger down the page until she found the most recent. Arthur Greaves, embarked, the 2nd of March 2023. Final stop, Black Route Terminus. Directly beneath it was a new entry. Inspector Hensley, embarked, the 14th of September 2023. Final stop, Black Route Terminus. Her breath caught, and under that, Detective Boone, embarked, the 14th of September 2023. Final stop, Black Route Terminus. Boone's jaw tightened. We're already in the book. The train lurched, throwing them sideways. Hensley grabbed the table to steady herself, and her eyes fell on something tucked inside the ledger, a photograph. It was grainy, black and white, showing the Phantom Station platform decades ago. A tall man stood among passengers, his face shadowed, but the stance and build were unmistakable. Hensley pulled another photo from her case file, a modern one of a man arrested 3 years earlier for fraud. Now out on parole, same build. Same watch on his wrist. "This guy's alive," Boone said. "If he's on that photo from the 1940s, he's either a time traveler or he never left the Black Route," Hensley cut in. "And he's been using it to come and go." The implication hit them both. The killer could ride the train undetected, slip off at any point in time, and disappear into the fog. The train shuddered again, slowing. Through the window, faint lantern light glowed in the mist. Another station, but one that didn't exist on any map. The conductor appeared in the doorway, still holding the ledger. "Final stop," he said with that deadened smile. Boone whispered, "We get off. We're done. We stay on, we find out where it goes." Hensley's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't step off." "Not yet." Chapter 7. The Trap on the Black Route. The train's grinding brakes let out a metallic wail as it rolled into the Phantom Station. The architecture was unlike anything Hensley had seen, part Victorian, part industrial, with sweeping iron arches and soot-blackened glass panels. Lanterns hung from hooks, their flames flickering but never wavering, as though the air here had no wind. Figures lingered on the platform, pale, motionless, dressed in clothing from different decades. A woman in a 1920s cloche hat, a soldier in World War II uniform, a boy clutching a tin lunch pail. All stood in silence, eyes fixed on the train. The conductor stepped aside to let them disembark. "Stay in the carriage," Hensley whispered to Boone. "I want to see what happens." One by one, the passengers filed out, vanishing into the fog beyond the station's edge. Not walking away, blending into it, their bodies dissolving into mist. Then came the last to disembark, the man from the old photograph. He stepped onto the platform, his movements smooth, unhurried. In this strange light, his features were sharper. High cheekbones, dark eyes, a thin smile. He wore a conductor's cap tucked under his arm, but his clothes were modern. A weatherproof jacket, leather boots. Boone leaned closer to Hensley. "That's him." No question. Hensley's mind worked fast. If he could ride the Black Route at will, he could commit murders anywhere, anytime, and leave investigators chasing a ghost. She needed proof he was alive. Proof he wasn't just another phantom. She slid her phone out, pressed record, and quietly stepped into the corridor. The man turned slightly, sensing movement. His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then he smiled wider, like someone recognizing an old friend. "Inspector," he said. His voice was warm, unsettlingly familiar. "I see the train found you." She kept her tone even. "You've been busy." His gaze flicked to Boone, then back. "You shouldn't be here. You're not ready for the Terminus." "Neither were they," she shot back, nodding toward where the dissolved passengers had stood. He tilted his head. "They asked to get off." Before she could press him, the whistle blew again. The lantern light dimmed, the platform blurred, and in the blink of an eye, the station was gone, replaced by endless rails and fog. The man was still there, though, leaning casually against the carriage wall. "Since you've boarded," he said, "you might as well understand the rules. No one can ride the black route unless I let them. Which means, Inspector, you're here because I wanted you here." Boone stepped forward, fists clenched. "Why?" The man's smile didn't falter. "Because you're the first one in decades who might actually make it to the Terminus alive." Chapter 8. The Ledger of the Dead. The man, who still refused to give his name, sat across from them in the velvet compartment, the leather-bound ledger resting casually in his lap. Every so often, he'd run a pale fingertip along the edge, like a priest caressing a holy text. Hensley kept her voice even. "That book. Every victim's name is in there, isn't it?" "Passenger," he corrected. "The word victim suggests they didn't choose to board." Boone bristled. "Greaves didn't choose anything. You killed him." The man's smile was maddeningly patient. "I offered him a way out. He refused to pay the fare. The black route is unforgiving about unpaid debts." Hensley leaned back, pretending to relax. "So this isn't just murder for you, it's a business." "Everything is a business," he said, leaning forward. "Even death." That's when Boone's eyes flicked to the ledger and widened. He'd spotted something Hensley hadn't, a small brass latch at the side. When the man looked away, Boone mouthed, "Distract him?" Hensley stood, pacing to the window. "You said I'm the first who might make it to the Terminus alive. What makes me different?" "You're not afraid of what you'll see when you get there," he said without hesitation. "Most people, they can't even imagine it. But you've been close before, haven't you, Inspector? The one case that still wakes you up at 3 a.m. Her chest tightened. He'd been reading her, studying her. While his attention was fixed on her, Boone's hand darted out, flipping the latch on the ledger. The cover shifted, revealing a hidden compartment inside the thick back cover. He slid out a thin stack of photographs and a folded map. The map was a web of train lines, some real, some non-existent, all converging on a place marked Terminus. The photographs were worse. Victims, crime scenes from decades apart, in cities scattered across continents. In each one, in the background, was the same man, unchanged by time. Hensley turned from the window, meeting Boone's eyes. She saw the silent confirmation. This was their proof. But the man noticed the open ledger. His expression cooled. "That," he said quietly, "was unwise." The lights in the carriage flickered. The floor seemed to tilt beneath them. Outside the window, the fog grew darker, thicker, until it looked almost solid. The man stood, slipping the ledger under his arm. "Next stop is mine alone. You won't like it." The whistle blew, a sound so low and resonant it rattled the glass. And ahead, out of the dark mist, a station emerged. Not a station built for people. Chapter 9, the Terminus. The station loomed like the skeleton of some impossible beast, its iron girders arching high above a platform that seemed to stretch forever into the fog. There were no walls, only columns, and between them, shifting curtains of shadow that moved as if alive. The train eased to a stop with a hiss of steam. The man stepped off first, his polished boots clicking against the stone. "This," he said without turning, "is where the living pay their fare." Hensley and Boone followed cautiously, their breath clouding in the frigid air. The platform wasn't empty. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of figures stood in orderly rows. Their faces were obscured, as if someone had blurred them with a brushstroke. But their clothes told a story, an airline stewardess uniform from the 60s, a miner's helmet caked with soot, a child's school cardigan. One by one, they stepped forward, touching the man's outstretched hand, and vanishing instantly. No scream, no sound. Just gone, Boone whispered. Where are they going? The man glanced back, wherever they were always meant to be. Hensley scanned the crowd. Then she froze. At the far end of the line, half hidden in the mist, stood Arthur Greaves, the man whose body they found at the Phantom Station. He looked whole, alive. She stepped toward him, but the man blocked her path with a single hand. Careful, Inspector. Once you speak to one of them, you risk joining them. Her eyes locked on Greaves. Why bring him here? Why bring me here? The man smiled faintly. Because some debts can only be collected in person. And yours has been a long time coming. From behind, Boone pressed something into her palm. The folded map from the ledger's hidden compartment. One of the routes branched from the Terminus, marked in red ink, return. Boone's voice was low. If we can find that track, we can get out. The man tilted his head, as if hearing their thoughts. Inspector, detective, you have one choice before the train departs again. Pay your fare or stay forever. The whistle echoed through the fog, a sound that felt less like a warning and more like a countdown. Chapter 10, The Last Departure. The whistle's wail hung in the cold air like a blade. Somewhere deep in the fog, an unseen mechanism groaned to life, and the tracks beneath the platform began to hum. Hensley tightened her grip on the folded map. The return track was their only way out, but it was on the opposite side of the terminus. Past rows of faceless passengers waiting for the man's touch, Boone leaned in. We go now while they're focused on him. The man stepped forward, his voice rising above the mist. All fares must be paid before departure. The black route waits for no one. Hensley moved fast, weaving between the passengers. Their blurred faces didn't turn, didn't react, but she could feel their attention, like invisible threads pulling at her. Each one radiated a strange pull, a whisper urging her to stop, to stay. Boone stayed close behind. Don't look at them, he muttered. They reached the far end of the platform and stopped. A guard stood there. Not a man, not entirely. His skin was the color of iron, his eyes hollow sockets burning with cold light. He lowered a halberd across the track. Tickets, he rasped. Hensley pulled the old ticket she'd found at the Phantom Station from her coat pocket. The guard took it, turning it over once before nodding and stepping aside. Boone followed, handing over nothing, yet the guard let him through. They stepped onto the return track just as the man noticed them. Inspector! His voice was sharp now, stripped of charm. That line is closed. Hensley turned. Then you'd better catch us before it leaves. The fog churned violently, and the man moved toward them, the ledger in one hand like a weapon. But before he could reach them, the return train appeared, not from the mist, but from the dark, as if it had been hidden between moments in time. Its doors opened without a sound. Boone shoved Hensley inside. She reached back for him, but he was already pushing her away. You go, he said. I'll hold him. Boone! The door slid shut. Through the window, she saw Boone step in front of the man, blocking his path. The train jerked forward, pulling her away, faster and faster, until the terminus was swallowed by shadow. Hensley sat alone in the empty carriage, the hum of the rails beneath her. She opened her hand. The map was gone, but in its place was the brass latch from the ledger. And scratched into its surface were 3 words: one way back. Epilogue, one way back. The train screeched to a halt. Inspector Hensley opened her eyes to find herself sitting on a wooden bench beneath the flickering lamps of the city's abandoned rail yard, the very spot where she had first followed the sound of the phantom whistle. The the fog was gone. The air was heavy with rain and the faint smell of rust. She stumbled out, heart still hammering. Her phone buzzed to life in her pocket, notifications flooding the screen. Missed calls, urgent messages. She'd been gone for not days, not years, hours. But Boone was gone. She called his name into the silence, her voice echoing off the skeletal remains of the platforms. No answer, only the distant rumble of a departing freight train. Her hand tightened around the brass latch, the only proof of what had happened. She turned it over again and again, tracing the words scratched into the metal. One way back? Was Boone trapped on the Black Route? Was he even alive? Or had he become another faceless passenger waiting for the ledger's final touch? Later, when she filed her report, the official record would call it a psychological episode. The coroner's findings on Greaves were vague. The photograph she'd seen in the ledger vanished without a trace. But she knew. The phantom train station hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't disappeared. It was waiting. And one night, when the whistle cut through the fog again, she would be there, ticket in hand, ready to board. Because this time she wasn't chasing a killer. This time she was bringing someone back.